Hello, welcome to Fireside with Peter Adkison on Gen Con TV. For this season, we have teamed up with Dungeon Masters Guild to go in search of new stories from new voices in Dungeons and Dragons. And our guest today is Makenzie De Armas. And among other things, she was the lead writer for The Islands of Sina Una, which we will definitely spend some time on because this has to do with Filipino mythology. And that just happens to be a topic I really like. So Makenzie, thank you for joining us on this show.
I'm so excited to be here. This is super exciting, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Well, what we like to do is I like to kind of go biographical a bit. Start with I like to start with kind of your background. Like tell us a little bit about who is Makenzie. Like where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? You know, that sort of thing.
So I'm born and raised Southern California. I'm still kind of in Southern California. Went to university in Southern California. Um, I think I've always had a passing interest in D&D. I'd love fantasy and fantasy books since I was like 7. That was just sort of my jam. But I never really got a chance to play D&D or any TTRPGs because the community I grew up in wasn't super open to that sort of thing. It wasn't something popular or fun, even when 5e came out and that was getting a rise in popularity. The people I lived around weren't playing it or still weren't really into it. Um, and then when I went to university, we had a tabletop role playing game club. But when I tried to join, and I was like, I want to play Dungeons and Dragons, they were like, we don't have any spots open. Sorry.
No
Go.
spots.
Good luck. We're full up on D&D players. Go. We're already full. Good luck.
And just let me intersect here. What were you there to study? What did you go to
I was
university for?
I went to university for a BFA in creative writing and a minor in computer science.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, I had
Nice.
always been interested in like games, but I had gone into university with like I'm going to do video games mindset, which is where the
Sure.
intersection between writing and computer science sort of happened. I still did end up writing for games, just the
It's
computer
different.
coding part is
Right.
sort of
Right.
not relevant, but it's okay. Um, but what had happened was that my partner was going to a different university and he had joined a D&D group there and was telling me all these stories because since I couldn't play, I was living vicariously through him. um, I had no clue what was going on half the time though because I didn't understand the rules. I didn't know like what initiative was or what a d12 and a d20 was and what exactly does a wizard do. And so what had happened was Dennis, or my partner Dennis, basically came to me one day and was like, "Hey, so I know I talked to you a lot about D&D, and I also know you have no clue what's going on. So I found this show where a bunch of voice actors sit around a table and they play Dungeons and Dragons, and it's a really good way to just listen and sort of learn how they play and how to, Dungeons and Dragons. I think you should listen because then you can figure out what I tell you when I,
Sure.
talk about
Sure.
Dungeons
That
and
makes
Dragons."
sense.
And
Yeah.
that happened to be Critical Role. And so I binged a bunch of Critical Role. I did the thing you're never supposed to do with a partner, and I watched ahead. I broke that rule, but it was worth it. And that's how I got involved with the online Twitter community with D&D people, which led me to meet a bunch of awesome people like James Hake and Hannah Rose, who was also on the show a couple
Yep.
weeks
That's
ago.
right. Oh, she
Um,
was a great guest.
she's amazing. I adore her so much.
Yes.
And yeah, she was one of she and James and a couple other people were some of the ones who encouraged me to start creating for D&D, which
Right.
is how I started
But
writing.
I want to go back to some of your early play experiences. Now did you kind of stay in this mode of playing D&D but not feeling like you understood it for a long
I
time or
didn't actually start playing D&D until like a year or so after I had discovered it because I just didn't have people to play it with. It wasn't until I had asked my partner to DM a game, and that was like a one-off. I had sort of understood it, but then it was through the online community where I found virtual groups to sort of jump in and play there. And so I learned through playing pretty much. I read the player's handbook and I read the dungeon master's guide or bits and pieces of it. But the easiest way I'd learned how to play was just by sitting and playing and going through it.
Right. So when you finally got a chance to actually play Dungeons and Dragons, what was that like? Or were you so well prepared by that time that it was like no big deal?
I'm trying to think, because it was, for me, it was like, it was super exciting, but at the same time, like, I'm very much a person who learns by doing and learns by watching other people do. And so by that point, I had seen a lot of other people play. And so I kind of knew the ropes. I knew
Right.
how to
Right.
essentially, I guess mimic is the wrong word, but I had seen people play. And so I knew how to play based on mimicking what they had done. Um,
Right. Well,
and so,
mimicking seems like a
yeah,
fair word.
yeah.
And and I think you might, Makenzie, I think you might be the first person I've talked to who learned this way. I mean, that I know of, right? I mean, I could have talked to somebody who
Yeah.
learned that way, and I didn't know that. But I've certainly seen a lot of commentary about how, because of Twitch
Hmm.
and online shows, how this has become a way for people to learn Dungeons and
Yep.
Dragons. That's as opposed to just having to do. I mean, I played Dungeons and Dragons for quite a while before I understood anything about what I was. I didn't get the fundamental idea of role playing until like well into it. Right. For it was a
Yeah.
long time, we were just following an adventure
Yep.
module as if it were the rules to a war game, right?
Yeah.
And really badly rules when you look at it that way. Once you
Hmm.
realize, no, it's not supposed to be that precise,
Yeah. No, I'm definitely one of the I'm definitely newer to D&D than a lot of D&D creators. Even some of like the sort of new voices in D&D are people who've been playing for a while. I've really only been playing for 2 years.
Oh,
Um
and you've
yes.
already got a big project that's about to come up, which we'll
Yeah.
get to. But yeah, so Daza has a question. He wants to
Hmm.
know what is or was your favorite character
Oh
and
boy.
character moment. Boy, that's putting you on the spot.
There's so many.
I
Okay.
know. Yeah, it just came from
I'm
chat.
trying to think.
Don't kill the messenger.
No, it's fine.
That's from chat.
I'm trying to think because oh, I'm just like thinking favorite D&D character. I think, well, I'm the one I'm playing right now over on Critical Bard's channel. I play a tiefling artificer. Um, I quite like I like her, and we haven't gotten a chance to play with her a lot yet because she's we were only like 4 episodes in. Um,
Right.
but she is one of my favorite characters to play because she has a robot. She has a steel defender, which is the mechanic term for it. But I have decided to take that steel defender and narratively make it a robot dinosaur. So she is a robot raptor that just sort of follows her around as her steel defender. And it's
Oh
been
wow.
super fun getting to play that.
Right.
Um, and getting to play this a tiefling who is super bubbly and excitable and loves tech and loves stuff, and then sometimes also switches into like deep gravelly infernal voice, and everyone's like, you had that in you, and I'm just like, yeah. Yeah, it was recently revealed she's a direct descendant of Mephistopheles, um which is
Uh-oh.
it's
Oh,
it's gonna be fine.
yeah.
Nothing bad comes from a direct descendant of Mephistopheles. It's fine.
I think that sounds great. I think that
Yeah.
sounds fabulous. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, so okay, so how did you move from playing, having watched a lot of D&D games online and starting to play D&D games online to getting connected to the community of writing for Dungeons and
Yeah.
Dragons?
They kind of happened simultaneously. At this time, I had met when I had connected with James and Hannah, and they were doing an actual play at the time that I was a fan of and I was following, mostly because like James and Hannah were my friends, and so that's how I found that, and it was a really good actual play too. So I watched it and it was awesome. But around the same time I had gotten connected through that and getting connected through the community through that was the junior year of my junior year of university, which is normally when you're supposed to be like applying for internships and stuff. That's how traditionally things go. The summer before your senior year, you're supposed to have an internship. So I was applying for a bunch of creative writing internships. I had no writing. I had a bit of a mental breakdown the leading beginning of my junior year, sort of that first semester, and I literally just couldn't produce anything. I had no creative work out anywhere. I had absolutely nothing. I had very little inspiration. And
Oh my gosh,
so what
that's
had
tough.
happened was I just simply so that I could have something to put on my application, I started and I just started writing stuff for DM's Guild. It's really small, pay what you want supplements. They weren't the greatest things I've written. I should probably go back and update them, but like it was strictly for like D&D was the one thing that I was like, I have somewhat of a creative spark for this. I've literally middle of the mental breakdown, had no creative spark for anything else, but I can do it for this. This works for me. And so just out of sheer desperation, I started writing stuff for DM's Guild. Turns out it was kind of okay.
Good
And
thing
so
it
I just
wasn't like a sudden urge to write, say, Gaelic
no,
horror
no.
poetry,
I mean,
right?
like, I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure I had
like D and
tried that
D.
and it
That's
didn't work out too. Like, I had tried
yeah.
so many things. I'd thrown so many things at the wall and nothing had stuck. And so at that point, I was just like, I need to do something. I have nothing. And so I started doing that. I did not get any of the internships I applied to, though. But by the time the rejections had come around, I had started really leaning into producing things, writing for D&D and doing stuff for DM's Guild. And so at that point, I was like, well, I may not have an internship, but I do have some avenue of creation. And so I just sort of went whole hog into
you,
being an
you
online content creator for D&D.
my senior year of college is similar in that my friends and I decided to ignore all the recruiters so that we could play Dungeons and Dragons more, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what we did. And yeah, in retrospect, I think it was the right move. So hey, we have a question from chat from Grinning
Yeah.
Grig. I apologize if I don't get the name pronounced that correctly, but you typed it. Now, okay, the question is, now that you write D&D supplements, how do you explain D&D to friends, family, or even strangers who are unfamiliar with it?
So I kind of explain it as like it depends on who I'm talking to. If they have experience with like video games, I sort of explain it as like a cross between video games with like improv theater. And what I do is I write essentially the storyline. I write the steps for them to um, stop in on as they go through. I provide like the framework for them to build another story around. I also sometimes describe it as I provide the skeleton for character creation and provide room for players to fill it in themselves. Um, and sometimes I just go, I write for games. Please
Yeah.
don't ask me more.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fair. Okay, so let's edge into Sina Una, the
Yeah.
islands of. So,
Mm-hmm.
how did this project get started, and how did you get pulled into it?
So I wasn't around for the projects for the project's inception or the original Indiegogo campaign. So I can't speak for how it got started. From what I've heard, the lead director or one of the co-directors, Lucia, basically started it out as a way for her and other Filipino creators to connect with a history and a mythology that has been not only lost but systematically taken away from us due to Spanish colonization and other forms of imperialism, and generally reducing the amount of space the indigenous population of the Philippines is allowed to take in the cultural consciousness. Um, I got involved around the end of last year, beginning of this year. I had met the other co-director Joshua Mendenhall at PAX U. We had started talking. I told him, "Hi, I'm diaspora Filipino too. We both really want to connect with our heritage that has been lost from us." And he had seen some of the work I had done. And at that point, I had been brought on to a couple projects with some big names like Matt Koval. I had done some stuff with D&D Beyond. And so at that point, he brought me on and I was put in the lead writer position. And that's how I got started. And I've been working on it since the beginning of this year. And it's been the most amazing journey.
Yeah, well, I mean, that seems incredible to get brought in. I mean, usually projects, there's somebody who starts a project because they want to write it,
Yeah.
right? And so they started this project, but realized that none of them wanted to write it or
I think
something.
it was more like we all started this project because we wanted to, or the project was started because we wanted to connect with this culture. The
Okay,
hard
right.
part was figuring out how to actually bridge connecting with that culture in a narrative sense to mechanics, to writing in the D&D style. And that's really tricky because D&D mechanics and lingo has a lot of particularities that are kind of granular and really hard to get. So I was brought on to just sort of facilitate that and sort of figure out how to take this wealth of culture we were exploring, and distill it down into a way that builds a sandbox for people to play in.
And I guess, we should back up for a second for anybody watching this who has no idea what the heck we're talking about. The Islands of Sina Una is going to be a 5th edition. It's I say going to be because this is not released yet, but it's been funded. It's
Mm-hmm.
well into production and might be releasing soon. And so will be releasing soon. Yes. And the book is about pre-colonial Filipino mythology,
Mm-hmm.
folklore. Am I?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's a book that is essentially it's a 5e campaign setting with classes, subclasses, subraces, monsters, and a full 7 different islands that is based. It is built for 5e. Everything is based around pre-colonial Filipino culture and mythology. So we've got monsters from different mythologies. We've got sub classes and subclasses based around other elements of those cultures that haven't been explored. It's basically been a deep dive into, and the entire like creative team behind it is Filipino, and so for us, it's just been a great a way to connect with that
Oh,
those
yeah.
stories.
That that sounds fabulous. That
Yeah,
sounds great. Yeah.
it's like a lot of Filipino culture is passed down orally. And then the things that are written down have been written down by outsiders who have come in with the lens of from where they're from, whether they're from Spain or from Europe or other places. They come in and they write about these cultures, but through that lens of an outsider.
Right.
And so what we have is it's very little, and it's slowly but surely starting to get lost, um, just through sheer time because when things are passed down orally and there's no record of them and people don't want to keep records of them because of um, wanting to erase indigenous people's histories, we don't have a way to connect with that. And so many of the people on the team are diaspora, as in we've never really we haven't been to the Philippines. We weren't born in the Philippines, and we don't really connect with that. So for us, it was a way to sort of see who we came from and who we are and whose blood sort of runs in our veins. Sina Una means roughly translates to those who came first, and that title is an homage to the fact that everything we've done in this book is as a means to honor and connect with our ancestors and preserve what they had done and the stories they told for other people in the future.
Right. So I have to wonder, I mean, have you been able to connect with other people who are trying to catalog this culture who are not, I mean, you're doing it in the context, well, there's a personal context of wanting to
Mm-hmm.
connect with your culture, but there's also a professional link to Dungeons and Dragons and publishing this product. But it strikes me that there would be other people who are trying to catalog this, or there might be other people
Yeah.
who are trying to catalog the same information,
Yeah.
not for gaming, but just for the culture of
Mm-hmm.
Filipino and history, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten to connect through some of them. Mostly my connection has been through the research team. There is a really large and thriving RPG community in Southeast Asia, though. A lot of Southeast Asians really thrive on this sort of thing. There is a whole microcosm of work going on there, and so there are a lot of indie RPG designers who
That's
have been doing
fabulous.
this
Good.
research
Yeah.
for so long, and we've been super lucky to have a couple of them be researchers, and cultural consultants on our team, and so getting to see how they've been preserving it, in other systems that aren't necessarily 5e has been super cool. We've also, mostly it's been us desperately searching every library we possibly can for books, because there are none. There are so few books, and it's just been us
Right.
going, where do we get this one book that was mentioned here like in one sentence, but we need to cross-reference it? Oh,
Right.
it's $300 to get it in the US. Hey, friends in the Philippines, can you get me that book, please? I know the co-director Joshua, like, he had to go through a long and arduous journey to get a book that, like, there were only 6 copies in North America, I believe, of this one
Right.
book. Just for Sina Una, he went through that to have his hands on one of the 6 copies in the entirety of North America of this book about Filipino culture. I don't even remember what it is, but it was just like,
Yeah. He did have something to say about that.
he has quite a lot to say about research. He has been the one who has been going through that, and it has been amusing and also really eye-opening to see
He's
how.
got some great stories, and
Oh yeah.
you have to prod him a little bit, but then they come out. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, so I have a question for you,
Mhm.
because first of all, I mean, I don't know you well yet, Makenzie, but
Yes.
you strike me as someone who would really want to do this in an authentic way.
Yes.
So, and of course, you are Filipino, but
Mhm.
you were raised in Southern California. You're a
Yes.
diaspora
Yes.
Filipino, like you said. So, how did you go about living up to what I perceive as your own standards? Because just because you're Filipino doesn't mean you
Yeah.
know everything. There's,
Yep.
like
Mhm. Yeah, for me it's been a lot of self-introspection and a lot of research. It mostly, I mean, actually pretty much evenly on both. I've put it upon myself to read and learn as much as I can, and getting over my fear of asking questions of the people who do live in the Philippines, or like our researchers who are far more steeped in knowledge about the myths than I am.
so you mentioned research teams. So
Yes.
you had people who
We have
presumably
dedicated researchers for this
who
book
were
because
helping you,
we don't want to mess it up.
right?
These are too important for us to mess up, and there have been a lot of instances where people see a myth and they want to appreciate it, and they look at the Wikipedia article, or they look at like one auxiliary article on the internet, and then they call it a day. um, and we didn't want to do that because there's a lot of bias that comes when people write those articles, and so we've been very
Right.
diligent in
Good, good,
bookkeeping.
good, good. Okay, so hey, we have a question here from Grin and Greg. Thank you again, and
Yeah.
that really goes from this esoterica down to the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Does this include adventures? I mean,
Yes.
encounters. Like
We
what do we?
don't Yeah, we don't have a full length adventure in this book. I think if there may be a chance, and I'm certainly open to it, if people do end up wanting it. We have like a couple of ideas for some that were tossed around but never eventually made it to production, simply because of the timeline, and also
Sure.
because life gets complicated because pandemic and other things, and so things end up falling to the wayside. So we don't have any adventures in the book, but we do have, in the world building, and then in the world building, in the magic items, and in the monster section, the fluff text or the flavor text is
The
very,
fluff text.
yeah,
Did you
fluff
just
text is,
say fluff? Is that
yeah,
what you secret? Is that secretly what you call it? The fluff
that's what we call it. It's fluff text. It's like there's stat blocks and then there's fluff text. It's like it's the
It's okay.
fluff.
It's okay. It's the fluff text. It's
It's
great.
the fluff
Fabulous.
text. Whoopsies.
You heard
The
it here
fluff text,
first.
or the flavor text.
Yes, yes.
The
We had the
text that
same thing on
accompanies.
magic cards. We had the flavor text on magic. Yeah, it's the fluff text. I got
It's
it. I got it.
it's
Yeah.
fluff, not because it's unnecessary, but it's not the
It's
hard mechanic stat blocks. So
it's
it's
the
it's
flavor. It's the
floof.
flavor of it. Yeah. Right. So
Um
but so you have all
yeah.
the pieces. It
Yeah.
wouldn't be that hard for a
Oh
DM
yeah,
worth their
there is
salt to
so
dive
much
in and
little bits of lore that are just
right.
entwined in these stat blocks, and in the magic items, and even
Well,
in
stat
the
blocks.
world
That sounds
building.
good. Yeah. So
Yeah, no,
you got magic items, you've got monsters.
Mm-hmm.
You've got subclasses, you
Yes,
said
we've got
that.
subclasses and 2 all new classes.
Okay. So now, so this brings, this is a nice segue to sort of the
Mm-hmm.
question of that, and you also kind of alluded to this earlier. Taking, Dungeons and Dragons is written from a very Eurocentric,
Yeah.
European medieval framework, right?
Yes, it is.
And so, how do you how do you move that to the Philippines, pre-colonial?
Um, a lot of patience and a lot of creative thinking, I think, is the answer. we've I yeah, I think the thing that has tripped us up a lot is I think it, or not tripped us up, but the thing that has required a lot of careful consideration has been like the sub races, because
Right.
they're halflings and elves and gnomes. They're a little easier to work with, because it's like, okay, well, I mean, their halflings are traditionally, hill folk or forest folk. So you know what? We have mangroves in the Philippines, so let's put them together. Like with the gnomes, it's like, okay, they're usually, earth folks. So what do we have in the earth that's unique? Oh, we have a lot of gold in the Philippines, so we can have gold gnomes. But we ran into a lot of problems when it got to the dragonborn and the tieflings and the half orcs, because those are so innately tied to
Right.
European mythology.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so those ones we have not completely redesigned, but we have essentially done what we can to remove what is the archetypal qualities that make a dragonborn, or make a tiefling, and figured out a way to fit them into the context of the islands.
Right.
So for like the dragonborn, we don't have dragons in the sense of, the bat-winged fire-breathing creatures. But what we do have, and what are incredible cultural importance, are the idea of ancestral spirits who will come
Yes.
who watch over people, and sometimes come back in the form of pythons or crocodiles to communicate with their descendants. And so our dragonborn are essentially that idea
Right.
taken
Right.
form. So these create our dragonborn take on, instead of, draconic features, they take on more crocodilian or python features. And they are spirits who have ancestral spirits who have come back from the dead and are living a second life, because they couldn't stand by and watch their descendants from the other side. They felt compelled to intervene and help.
Right. Right. And I was talking with we had earlier in this season Joshua
Mm-hmm.
Mendenhall on this show, and he also talked to us about us, and so far, by the way, you've done a good job of avoiding things that he said,
Yay.
although he did touch on the importance of spirits in
Mm-hmm.
Filipino mythology, which I think is great that you both brought that up. I actually think it's good that you both brought
Yeah,
this up
it's
because it
absolutely
underscores.
central to everything in the book. The idea
And
that spirits embody everything.
right. Yeah. No, I love that idea. And it's not, it's not unique to Filipino
Mm-hmm.
history. It's appeared in other cultures as well. I think it's a great um to see a case where you've embraced this and taken it on. I think that's great. So I'm going to get to a question that Daza asked earlier, and I said I think this sounds more like an exit the topic question.
Mm-hmm.
Daza was wondering if you're going to go on and do something similar for other cultures, or I mean, are you going to become like you're going to stake out a territory of being um, the
Yeah, it's something where I I'm Filipino. I'm that's what I'm Filipino. I'm just I'm not from any other culture or
right,
anything, and I would want to, if there was a way I could facilitate helping other people do what we did with Sina Una, I would want to. But at the same time, I'm not from those cultures. And as much as I want to facilitate and allow that to happen, it is not my place to tell those stories. Just as it isn't other people, like it is my place to tell these Filipino stories, because this is my culture. These are the spirits I carry. But I believe the question mentioned Australian First Peoples. I'm not from that group, and those aren't the stories for me to tell. Same thing with I know I have friends who are working on Arabic mythology inspired 5e settings. As much as I want to help and much as I will help and encourage and facilitate that as much as possible and support it as much as I can, those are not my stories to tell. So as much as I can do is use the platform that Sina Una hopefully creates to provide stepping stones for other people from other marginalized cultures to do what we did, to get them the researchers, to get them that funding and that information, and the publishing and all of that, so that they can also write and explore and experience their cultures in the way that we did. I think that's the best way to answer it.
Yeah, that's great. That's fabulous. Good. Um, well, good. I think that answers the question very nicely. All right, we will move on. So one of your other credits is Kingdoms and Warfare.
Yes.
Well, first of all, this did not look like a fifth edition D&D book, is it?
It
Oh,
it is. It is fifth edition. It is
okay, Lisa Penrose over there, she's keeping a close eye on what I'm doing here. I think if I strayed away from D&D, she might have something to say.
Yeah.
No, I'm just joking.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, Sally. No, Kingdoms of Warfare is fifth edition. It is again a project I wasn't around on from its inception. It was originally a Kickstarter by Matt Colville, for a supplement that essentially allows people who play D&D, and this is taking a big turn from Sina Una, which is exploring something that is distinctly like non-Western, non-European,
Right,
to
right.
the idea of feudal kingdoms and European warfare. So
Right.
big hard turn, but
Yeah.
it's super fun because it definitely plays on the fantasies that are like in those touchstones of fantasy, like Lord of the Rings.
And what is the product? Just start with the basics. Like, is
So the
this
product will be a supplement that allows you to essentially build a kingdom. It basically lets you and your players form an organization, and then from that organization have titles that give you certain abilities, and then through having those titles you can build out your organization, your quote unquote kingdom. You can go to wars with other kingdoms or other organizations. So if you're like a thief, you can build the thieves guild and then go to war with other thieves guild and use like
Okay.
espionage to undermine that thieves guild. Or you can build a duchy and rule over your little plot of land and make sure your
Right.
subjects are doing okay. It sort of plays on the idea of a lot of city building video games where you get to build your own kingdom.
And this is, like you said, this is fifth edition. So
Yes.
you're like you're playing in a typical D&D player group, like half a dozen people, and you're saying, okay, it's like any other D&D campaign in a sense, and abstractly, but you're saying no, our theme for this campaign is that we're gonna create a kingdom.
For Kingdoms in Warfare, it was essentially, we want to build something that can be played in a usual 5e campaign, but at the same time, it's like you can alternate between like doing Kingdoms in Warfare and then going back into being like an individual adventurer and then going back and like being a part of this larger kingdom. Unlike with Sina Una, the like Kingdoms in Warfare is an auxiliary system. Like it has its own rules, and it like fits into or fits on top of 5e, but it isn't like with Sina Una where it's built inside the mechanics of 5e. This is sort of something you put on top if you want to use it.
Sure. Yeah, I get that actually. The first project that I ever worked on, which was the first project ever published by Wizards of the Coast, was a book called The Primal Order, which was a book about mythology in Dungeons and Dragons. And similar idea. We called it a cap system.
That's kind of what it is. So it's something that like if you are super interested in like that more tactical play of building a place you can lord over, that's what Kingdoms in Warfare is meant to do. And what it will have is a bunch of different organizations that have different abilities and stuff that you can sort of, if you want to build like a thieves guild, or you want to build an adventurers guild, or if you want to build like a merchant house.
So do you think people that were fans of Birthright would like this?
I don't know a lot about Birthright, gotta be honest.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I'm real sorry.
No, it's okay. So what was your role in this product?
I am one of the core designers, so I helped Basically at the beginning of this year, I, along with Matt Colville, James Introcaso, who has a bunch of credits on official D&D books, as well as Sam Mannell, we all got together and essentially had a week-long workshop where we just went in the office for like 10 hours, worked trying to build a system from the ground up that was compatible with 5e, but didn't entirely, but like was also it was 5e compatible, but also still unique. And so we just
Right.
worked for a
Right.
whole week getting that done.
Right.
And then we finished that week. We took some more time. We basically ended up scrapping a lot of what we did in that week because we realized this isn't going to work, but we also wouldn't have realized it if we hadn't taken that week. And then rebuilt again, and then rebuilt again. And then we finally worked together a system that sort of works. And we're going into like the second phase of production so far.
Now, I followed the link that you provided,
Mhm.
and the website showed pictures of miniatures right on the same
Yes.
page, and it made me wonder if it was if there is a miniatures gaming aspect, sort of closer to like a traditional miniatures game. As I mean,
Yeah.
D&D, you might call D&D a miniatures game depending on
Mhm.
how you play it, certainly, but it grew out of a more sort of formal traditional
Yeah.
miniature sort of
Yeah.
mindset.
I think it will be a more there's the kingdoms half, and then there's the warfare half, and the warfare half definitely plays into um that very much the old wargaming idea, very much tactical warfare and like moving units and stuff, and that's where a lot of those minis sort of come in.
Switch from column to square and hit the
Yep.
flank and
Yeah,
all
all
that
of that.
stuff. Oh
I've
yeah,
been
yeah.
working mostly on the kingdom side. I'm really bad at, for a D&D designer, I'm really bad at maps and understanding maps and visual
Well,
play in general. So I'm just kind of
pass
like,
along my name if they need any play testers for the
yeah.
wargaming part. I'd be happy to
I will
roll up
definitely
my
let them know.
sleeves and
Yeah.
give it a try.
Yeah, I'm very bad when it comes to tactical play. I'm just kind of like, they have a cool ability. I'm gonna, it's bad, but like it's cool. They breathe fire. Let me let them breathe fire, please.
Okay, excellent.
Uh,
All right, let's move on to I don't know where to go, to dark matter or Canarl next. Let's go to
mhm.
Canarl. Canarl's
Okay.
Candium. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did.
Canarl?
You did. You said
Yes,
it right.
yes.
I've
Canarl's
been,
Candy
yeah.
Compendium.
The point is to have the alliteration of Canarl's Candy Compendium. Um,
Yes.
but like no one ever pronounces the K. But I do put in, if you read the forward, it
Well,
does
obviously
say
I did.
it said like
It's
Canarl.
yes, it makes a point to say that
Yes.
right up front.
Yes. Look, the little goblin child is very particular about how she says her name, and you gotta do it.
Yes. Okay, so this looked to me like a book about magic items, but in
Yep.
the form of candy.
It
That
is essentially, yeah, that's basically what it is. It is a book of 50 consumable magic items,
right,
which
because you have to eat
normally,
the
yeah,
candy, right?
yep.
Yeah, you have to eat it. You can't
Normally in
just
D&D
lick
it's
it.
mostly just like potions, and that's pretty much the extent of consumable
Right.
magic items, but basically this was me going, I want to make a Halloween supplement, but I don't like spooky things because I just can't physically handle horror. So I wanted to do something, and I was like, what's another element of Halloween? Candy. Okay.
Candy.
And then it just sort of spiraled in like a manic creative haze of, what if it was a little goblin child who really knew candy? That's super cute. And then it just sort of kept going and going, and soon I had 50 magic items. And it is the reception for that book has been more than I expected. Because for me it was something like, I wanted to make something fun for Halloween, and I'm admittedly a younger designer, and I'm admittedly, I like whimsy, I like fun, I like, bright bubblegum pink things, and stuffed animals and stuff, and so I wanted to do something
But
that
that's
kind of
it's so
played into it.
important. That's great,
Yeah.
Mackenzie. I mean, it's so important. I mean, D&D, uh it's been heartwarming. Well, this season of Fireside, my prior seasons, I was interviewing people that I worked with back in the 90s, a bunch of old people, sitting around talking about the glory days. And this season has been meeting people who are working on Dungeons and Dragons now, and and it's so encouraging to see that the community is so vibrant, so excited. You and other people that Lisa's introduced me to, and Whimsy's great. It's a sign of usefulness and a sign of fun. And the goblin selling candy is great. So what can you tell me a couple of cool magic candy effects?
Okay. So
I'm putting you on the spot. I know.
yeah, I'm trying to
Yeah.
remember what are my favorites?
Oh my
There
God,
were
what were
so
they?
many.
Oh, there were 50, and I can't remember a single one of them.
Honestly, though, it was like I think I know one of my favorites. And this was like before Scene Una had happened. So this was before I had gotten a chance to really not necessarily connect, but even be comfortable with being POC. Um, a lot of POC designers have that issue of, or a lot of people I've talked to have that issue of like, okay, we're POC, but like, you try and blend into the woodwork. You try and be like everyone else and just sort of fly under the radar. But with one of the candies in this book, I called it Pandamonium, which is a play on the words pandemonium, as well as a Filipino dessert called pandan, which is a sweet sort of vanilla jelly that's usually served with coconut, and it's bright green, and it's one of my favorite things to eat. And
Derek would agree with you. By the way, he just said that's so good.
It's so good. It's my buko pandan, which is like coconut with like that sweet sort of vanilla syrupy, or that sweet vanilla plant jelly. Is like one of my favorite desserts ever. It's Filipino, and it was one of the.
And I have to credit myself. It was Marcus that said that, I think, and not Derek.
I am the Derek now. Fair. Okay. Yeah.
If people use these names that aren't their real names, like what? I don't. Mine is Peter Adkison. That's me. I can't.
Yeah.
Otherwise, anyway, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. So what is this Pandamonium?
Pandamonium. It's essentially one of the rarest candies in the book. Essentially, you eat it and you roll a d8 on a random effects table, and it's kind of like a wand of wonder where chaos happens because pandemonium, but It tastes good. You can lick this wand of wonder, essentially. Oh boy. That was one of my favorites. Another one of the ones we had what was one of my other ones? I always referenced it in the promotional art. It was like treacle tentacles. I don't quite remember what they were, but I'm pretty. The idea was, the black tentacle spell, because there's so many. There's
Everett's black tentacles.
Yeah. There's so many black tentacle spells where they just sort of like pop up and then. And so I was like, man, what if it was that, but something sugary or sticky. And I liked the alliteration of treacle, which is like molasses, and that was something fun where you eat that and it's just like you get tentacles. Nice. We had like dragon lollipops that like give you a breath weapon momentarily. We had a bunch of we had like coffee toffees, which were essentially like minor haste effects. There's 50 and I love them all.
Nice.
I think my other favorite thing wasn't necessarily the candies. It was getting to take on the role of Canary, the titular goblin child.
Right.
In the book, there are like little notes of like she scribbled herself and stuck them on these different pages, and getting to embody like a 4-year-old goblin child who just loves candy as in the middle of a sugar high, and not only loves candy but has a intensely innate and analytical approach to magical candy.
Right.
It just was so much fun to like take on that role of, I am a little goblin child. I will go write candy now. And just getting to take literally me sitting in some game design classes, just like, yeah, I'm definitely paying attention to the lecture. Is Candy Goblin writing up notes from Candy Goblin?
Right.
And just sort of being like, yeah, I'm definitely paying attention to what you're saying about narrative design in video games. Yep. Stanley Parable. Yeah, cool.
Oh, Makenzie, you're such a delight. So you brought up
Yeah.
we're gonna come back to dark matter if we
Yeah.
have time. You brought up the being POC, and
Mm-hmm.
so what can we talk about that a bit? I'm not even sure how to
Yeah.
start, what the right sort of
Um,
appropriate question is for me to
yeah.
ask it.
I
But
mean, it's something that pervades kind of everything I do, and it's something that is has been a journey for me to be more open about. Like I said earlier, for a while, I just sort of like to pass unnoticed in the woodwork. Like, I'm not super visibly POC. Like, if you look at me, you can probably tell I'm Asian, but I don't the way I look, a lot of people think like, "Oh, you're half Asian," or like, people have told me I pass as white all the time. I'm really light skinned, and I grew up in a diaspora household that basically never wanted to have anything to do with Filipino culture ever. So for me, a lot of my life has just been passing unnoticed. Same thing with like being a female creator and being a disabled creator. I have autism, and for a while, it's just been easier for me to pass unnoticed because there are a lot of stereotypes that come with being autistic or being disabled or being a woman in gaming or being a POC. And it took a lot of time and it took a lot of introspection and a lot of support from other people who were disabled or POC or women in gaming for me to start being more open about it. Um, I've very recently I was on D&D Celebration on a panel with a bunch of other disabled creators, and we built a dungeon together. And afterwards, I got a bunch of messages from people saying like, "Oh, it's so cool that you have autism and you were on that panel because like I'm autistic or my daughter's autistic, and she thought it was super cool that she saw someone like her on that panel." And it's like those moments that are those small messages where you don't think about how much your presence at the table might mean to someone until someone like you sees you and realizes, oh,
right,
if she can do
right,
it, then I can too.
right.
And that's why I've started becoming a little bit more open about it. Um, just because I might have been more open about it at first. There were more people like me who had come before. So I like to leave that door open for people to talk about it and, take up space.
Is it the autism piece? Does it present a challenge for you today in this moment? Like
Oh, yes.
this like is it okay to ask, like
Oh, yeah, no.
how is it a challenge for you here?
So, a lot of like I have a little bit of speech impediment. I don't know if it's been super noticeable because I've gotten better at sort of masking it, but I have a speech impediment where it's not stuttering, it's called cluttering, where I'll take a chunk of a sentence and then repeat it until I'm able to finish it. I'm also, and this is
Okay.
something that's really big when it comes to me learning how to DM and me playing D&D. I have trouble reading facial expressions and I have trouble understanding
Oh,
voice tone. So basically, when I play D&D, it is a very my brain has to go through a complex process of looking at someone's face, trying to match it with what their voice is saying, and then trying to go through the number of permutations that combination might mean before settling
right.
on the most likely option and going from there. It's been good to like help me essentially facilitate communication around the table because I just have to. I have to ask, "Hey, are you having fun? Are you doing good?" And basically using those, and it's like they sound like really inane questions, but for me, it's like I genuinely cannot tell if you're having fun. Please tell me because I cannot read your face. Um, it's like and I know people it's like I've been if you present me with a like grid of people I don't know and you tell me to identify which one they're smiling, I genuinely cannot do 50% of them. I will miss 50% of them.
Okay.
um yeah, and I'm also like fidgety. Like you can't see it, but I'm actually like I'm fidgeting with a couple fidget toys right now just to help me stay focused. That's just kind of like it's stuff that I am learning to be open about and talk more about because
Well, thank you for doing
yeah,
so. I think it's a reminder that in social situations to not rush to conclusions
yeah,
because you never know what
hmm
type of shit people are dealing with in their own heads.
Yeah.
You know, we
Yep.
just don't know.
Yeah.
We just don't
Yep.
know.
And it's like
Yeah.
with especially with like autism, I have become super good at what's called masking it and just pretending like I don't have it. And so it's really easy for me to just sort of pass. And that is something that I'm good at, but it shouldn't be something I have to do or feel like I need to do in order to fit in. And so if I can make space at the table so that other people other people who have similar neurodiversities to me, if I can make that space where they don't feel that pressure to mask, then that's good. And then
Yeah.
then I will have done my job as someone in the D&D space. I would have made space at a table for more people to be comfortable, and be happy playing as themselves and seeing themselves around a table.
It's interesting you use the phrase "make space at the table," given that when you first wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons, there was no space at the
Yep.
table for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's quickly cover Dark Matter starter kit
Real quick.
and then yeah, we have about 6 or 7 minutes we can spend on that, and then
Okay.
we'll get to my final question for you, and then we'll call it a day. Okay, so let's start with I've been failing to do this. I've been every product I've just dived into the guts of it. So let's frame this correctly from the beginning.
So
What is Dark
this
Matter?
is Dark Matter. I have a prop for this one.
Woohoo!
So Dark Matter is a 5e setting that is essentially brings science fiction into 5e. There are so basically you can have spaceship combat. There are subclasses and classes that allow you to take a lot of these science fiction tropes of like, Hans, I don't know, I don't want to say anything that would get them in trouble. But like, the space gunslinger or, copyright free laser swords, that sort of thing.
Well,
Blasters.
I took the sales text. You and your crew can pilot breathtaking starships, face down alien horrors, battle evil space wizards, and explore the furthest reaches of the galaxy.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a space opera, is what I call it.
Well, the interesting thing about what Dark Matter does, and the thing that I find it really interesting is that a lot of times in science fiction settings, they will place magic and technology at odds with each other. Like it's one or the other. But in this one, they have essentially taken the idea that technology is just sufficiently advanced magic, and magic is just sufficiently advanced technology. They are one and the same. So essentially, you can run a low magic Dark Matter game that takes more inspiration from like Star Trek, or more grounded in technology, or you can go lean towards the more space opera route and do things more inspired by Star Wars. It provides the flexibility for both, which is something I love. I personally tend more towards the space opera fantasy side because I love my space dogfights. I love my space battles where it's like you're just careening through the stars and shooting at things. I find that super fun. And I've gotten to write like a couple, so that's been super cool.
So one of the challenges it always seems to me for science fiction games is like, okay, you're in a spaceship, and if the spaceship gets destroyed, it's a TPK situation, right?
Yeah.
Or is there some creative workaround for that?
I think so. I guess the answer is technically yes. There are mechanics for ship detonation. When you reduce a ship to zero, zero hit points, then you the ship can just like jettison a escape pod or a life support system. It goes boink, and then you're okay. So there are ways to work around it. And the cool thing about Dark Matter is that if you don't want to put your players into that perilous situation where they might, die in the cold, hard vacuum of space, you don't have to. You can honestly have an entire campaign that doesn't deal with spaceships at all. You could just have a campaign on an alien world, or you can just, hand wave space travel with like the equivalent of a screen wipe Star Wars screen wipe, where it's like,
Yeah,
and they are
yeah.
at another planet now. You can totally do that and never deal with space combat.
Yeah, but the ship combat, okay, like
But
you
that's like
said,
my
that could be
favorite part, though.
yeah. So combining magic and science
Mhm.
fiction, it seems like that you could have the thing of like, well, built into every spaceship
Mhm.
is if there is a final destruction scenario,
Yep.
everybody gets boosted off to the ethereal plane and is
Yep.
floating in the ethereal
That's
plane until
there
the Gith
are
Yankee come by and
yeah,
collect you all.
there are
Yeah,
actual spells that are like zone of atmosphere. Poof.
yeah,
We can
yeah.
breathe in space now. So there are like various
Good.
different options for them to survive getting blasted into the cold hard vacuum of space. But it's still enough to be like a challenge of you might get blasted into the cold hard vacuum of space.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is
Well, there's
still
got to be
super fun.
there's got to be a threat, incredible
Yeah,
threat.
you know.
So what was your involvement in this project? How did you?
So for the Dark Matter starter kit, I wasn't involved in this book. This is the core book. I wasn't involved in. I was involved in the starter kit, so I have had a hand in the starter kit adventure. So the starter kit is going to come with a full campaign adventure that you can play, and I helped write a section of that. I got to write spaceship combat, which always makes me happy.
Yes.
And then I'm also writing a couple of the stretch goals. So I'm writing a couple of the campaigns or parts of some of the campaigns that are coming out as part of the stretch goals that were released. I'm writing one that's slightly more leaning towards campy space science fiction, the Grax's Guys for Cheap arc, which is a bunch of a cool scrappy mercenary crew goes on really ridiculous adventures for increasingly ridiculous clients. So I get to write one installment of that. Very much a
Crazy, ridiculous clients. Okay.
Yep.
For
Increasingly, yep.
example. For example.
Well, one of them is hunting a giant space ferret. Another one is a Phoenix Wright attorney space law battle. Mine is essentially Magic School Bus in space. You got to chaperone a bunch of kids on you have your mercenary team has garnered critical acclaim across the universe, and that means you have fanboys and fangirls and just fan creatures now, and some of them are kids and they want to go tour your base, and now you got to escort them from your base back to their school. Good luck.
Fan
Stuff
aliens.
like that.
Yeah. Perfect. That's fantastic. That's great.
And then I'm going to be writing one that's all about mechs, which we haven't started on yet, but I'm still super excited to get started.
Mechs, like BattleTech style mechs. Yeah, great.
Yep.
Oh, fabulous. Excellent. Excellent.
Mechs.
Right.
Like Pacific Rim full on, you're in a mech.
Yes. That's a trope that has survived the test of time. That's a good one.
I'm excited to build mechs.
Okay, so my last question for you is sort of more introspective. What do you hope to bring to Dungeons and Dragons during your Dungeons and Dragons career?
Boy, it's hard to really distill that down, mostly because I haven't been doing this for a while. As I have a lot of credits and stuff, and I've gotten the wonderful opportunity to work on so many cool things in such a short period of time, but I'm still, in a large part, I'm still very new. I'm still very green, and it's hard for me to figure out where my place is in the D&D microcosm. I think at the end of it, if I can, like you brought it up earlier, if I can do what people didn't do for me when I started out, if I can make space at the table, and more importantly, make a space at the table where people are comfortable being themselves. If I can be a creator who is, a female, like a woman, a person of color, disabled, who is happily and openly and successfully creating for this game, and show people who are like me, who have parts of that identity, that they are also welcome here, and that they have someone who is a creator who will fight for them to be welcome here, then I think I will have done my job. I
think
will
that's
have
fantastic.
made some cool things, but that's in the end, I think, my goal, just to make space and be able to be that person, so that when someone watching this interview or watching something else later along the line who wants to get into the game and they see me and then they can go, oh, well, she does this, so I can do it too. I think that in the end is what I want to do. What I want to bring.
I think that's fantastic. Very, very good. Very well done. And great, a great time. I really enjoyed our time here. And I think you're very sharp, very creative, very articulate. And it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, well, that wraps up another episode of Fireside with Peter Adkison here on Gen Con TV. My guest next week, let's see, is that, I say October 7th, is that right? I think it is, October 7th, will be Willie Abil, who has a number of credits, but the one I'm curious about is called Necromancy Can Be Good. That sounds good. All right. But that's a whole week away. Don't worry. We have lots of other great programming here on Gen Con TV to keep you busy until then. Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific, we have Table Takes with special guests this week, Gabe James and Tanya DePass from Into the Motherlands, a Twitch-funded, all-Black and POC written and performed actual play and new RPG. At 4 p.m. Pacific on Friday, we will have a special Gen Con roundtable with B. Dave Walters, Tanya DePass, and Gabe James talking more into the Motherlands. On Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific, we have the board games with the brothers Murph. On Wednesday at 1:30 Pacific, we have board games with This Game Gets Dicey at 4 p.m. Pacific on Wednesday. Back to me with Fireside, where my guest will be, again, Willie Abil. If you miss any of our shows, you can find all of our streams about a day or so later on our Gen Con Video YouTube channel. So be sure to check them out there, including all the episodes that we did where I interviewed people behind the scenes from Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons back in the day, and the newer episodes we're doing of people working on Dungeons and Dragons now. Oh, I'm back. I'm just saying my thanks. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. My internet is unstable, it says. I was just saying thank you to everybody and see you next week. All right. Thank you. Yeah, bye.